Section 2 of Police. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Police by Robert W. Chambers. Preface. On a beautiful day in spring, as I was running as hard as I could run, pursued by the New York police and a number of excited citizens, my mind, which becomes brilliantly active under physical exhilaration, began to work busily. I thought about all sorts of things. I thought about hard times and financial depression, and about our great president who is in a class all alone with himself and soon to become extinct. I thought about art and why there isn't any when it's talked about. I thought of macrolepidoptera, of metagrammatism, monoliths, manicures, and monsoons. And all the time I was running as fast as I could run, and the faster I ran, the more things I thought about until my terrific pace set my brain whizzing like a wheel. I felt no remorse at having published these memoirs of my life, which is why the police and populace were pursuing me, maddened to frenzy by the fearless revelation of mighty scientific truths in this little volume you are about to attempt to read. Ubicumque ars ostentatur, veritas abesse videtur. I thought about it clearly, calmly, concisely as I fled. The maddened shouts of the prejudiced populace did not disturb me. Around and around the Metropolitan Museum of Art I ran. The inmates of that institution came out to watch me, and they knew at a glance that I was one of them, for they set up a clamor like a bunch of decoy ducks when one of their wild comrades comes whirling by. "Police! Police!" they shouted. But I went careening on uptown, afraid only that the park squirrels might club together to corner me. There are corners in grain. Why not in? But let that pass. I took the park wall in front of the great Mr. Carnegie's cottage at a single bound. He stood on his terrace and shouted, "Police!" He was quite logical. The Equal Franchise Society was having a May party in the park near the Harlem Mere. They had chosen the Honorable William Jennings Bryan as Queen of the May. He wore low Congress gaiters and white socks. He was walking under a canopy crowned with paper flowers, his hair curled over his coat collar. The tips of his fingers were suavely joined over his abdomen. The moment he caught sight of me, he shouted, "Police!" He was right. The cabinet lacked only me, and I might have consented to tarry, might have allowed myself to be apprehended for political purposes, had not a nobler, holier, and more imperative duty urged me northward still. Though all Bloomingdale shouted, "Stop him!" and all the Matawan yelled, "Police!" I should not have consented to pause. Even the quackitudinous recognition spontaneously offered by the Metropolitan Museum had not been sufficient to decoy me to my fellows. I knew, of course, that I could find a sanctuary and a welcome in many places, in almost any secretarian edifice, any club, any newspaper office, any of the great publishers, any school, any museum. I knew that I could be welcomed at Columbia University, at the annex to the Hall of Fame, in the Bishop's Palace on Morningside Heights. There were many places all ready to receive, understand, and honor me. For a sufficiently crippled intellect, for a stillborn brain, for the intellectually aborted, there is always a place on some editorial, secretarian, or educational staff. Try it! But I had other ideas as I galloped northward. The voiceless summons of the most jealous of mistresses was making siren music in my ears. That coquettish jade, science, was calling me by wireless, and I was responding with both legs. And so, at last, I arrived at the Bronx Park and dashed into the administration building where everybody rose and cheered me to the echo. I was at home at last, unterrified, undismayed, and ready again, as always, to dedicate my life to the service of truth and to every caprice and whim of my immortal mistress, science. But I don't want to marry her. Magna est veritas, sed major et loquenquo reverentia. Police! Being a few deathless truths concerning several mysteries recently and scientifically unraveled by a modest servant of science. Quo quisque stultior, eo magis insolescit. End of section 2. Recording by Valentina Vocelli.